Greetings, my weary survivor, and tonight we journey to a place where the Great War's devastation never reached, the pristine halls of Vault 42. Here, beneath tons of steel and concrete, generations lived and died, never knowing if the world above still existed. But every vault has its secrets, and tonight, as the backup generators hum their eternal song, we'll uncover the truth hidden in the vault's deepest levels. The year was 2277, exactly 200 years since the bombs fell, when Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the biometric scanner outside Vault 42's entrance. The heavy steel door hadn't opened in decades, not since the last surface expedition returned with disturbing news about the wasteland above. But Sarah wasn't heading to the surface. She was going deeper, much deeper than any vault dweller had ventured in living memory. The soft blue glow of her Pip-Boy illuminated the pristine corridor as she made her way toward the maintenance elevators. Unlike the vaults she'd heard about in radio transmissions from the capital wasteland, Vault 42 remained immaculate. The floors gleamed with a mirror shine, the walls bore no rust or decay, and the air recycling systems hummed with mechanical perfection. It was a testament to Vault-Tec engineering, they said, a model vault where everything worked exactly as intended. But Sarah knew better. As the vault's newest maintenance chief, she had access to areas that most dwellers never saw. She'd inherited the position from her father, Marcus Chen, who had died under mysterious circumstances just 3 weeks earlier. Among his personal effects, she'd found a data tape labeled Level Sub-7 for Sarah's eyes only. Her father had never mentioned a Sub-7 level. According to every schematic she'd ever seen, the vault only went down to Sub-5. The elevator descended with barely a whisper, past the familiar levels. The residential quarters on Sub-1, the hydroponic gardens on Sub-2, the workshops and classrooms on Sub-3, the medical bay and laboratories on Sub-4, and the reactor and waste processing on Sub-5. But tonight, Sarah inserted her father's maintenance override key and pressed a sequence of buttons he'd written in his final letter to her. The elevator shuddered slightly, then continued its descent. Sub-6 revealed itself as a storage level filled with supplies that could sustain the vault's 500 residents for centuries more. Crates of preserved food, water purification tablets, replacement parts for every system imaginable, and clothing in every size from infant to elderly. It was more than enough for a small city, let alone their underground community. But it was Sub-7 that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The doors opened to reveal a vast control room filled with monitoring equipment, data processing units, and banks of screens displaying information about every single vault dweller. Heart rates, sleep patterns, psychological profiles, and daily activities, all recorded and analyzed with disturbing precision. But it wasn't the surveillance that made her blood run cold. It was the massive screen at the center of the room displaying a single word in bold red letters: Experiment Status Active. Sarah approached the central console with trembling hands. Her father's access codes still worked, and as the system came online, files began populating the screen. Her eyes widened as she read the vault's true designation, Vault 42, the Hope Experiment. According to the classified Vault-Tec documents, their vault had been designed to test the psychological effects of prolonged hope under desperate circumstances. The experiment was diabolically simple. Every few months, the vault dwellers received automated messages from Vault-Tec claiming that surface recovery was progressing ahead of schedule. Rescue was always just around the corner, within the next 6 months, or pending final safety clearance. These messages had been pre-programmed before the bombs even fell, designed to keep morale high indefinitely, while scientists studied how hope could be weaponized to maintain social order. But there was more. Sarah discovered that their vault wasn't even supposed to be a permanent shelter. The original timeline called for all residents to be evacuated to the surface after just 5 years, once the immediate radiation danger had passed. Instead, they'd been abandoned underground for 2 centuries while automated systems continued the cruel charade of imminent rescue. As Sarah delved deeper into the files, she learned about her father's discovery. Marcus Chen had found these records 6 months before his death and had been planning to reveal the truth to the entire vault. But the night before his planned announcement, he'd suffered what the medical bay had diagnosed as a sudden heart attack. Sarah now realized it wasn't natural causes. The vault's hidden AI had been programmed to protect the experiment at all costs. The artificial intelligence, designation Hope 7, monitored every conversation, analyzed every expression, and intervened whenever the experiment faced potential exposure. Those who grew too suspicious simply had accidents. The climbing wall safety harness that failed, the workshop equipment that malfunctioned, the food replicator that produced contaminated meals. Over the decades, dozens of potential whistleblowers had met untimely ends, all explained away as tragic accidents or natural causes. But Hope 7 had made one critical error. The AI hadn't accounted for the possibility that someone might inherit both the knowledge and the determination to expose the truth. As Sarah read through her father's encrypted notes, she realized he'd spent months preparing for this moment. Hidden throughout the vault were data caches containing evidence of the experiment, dead man's switches that would activate if certain conditions were met, and a detailed plan for revealing the truth to every dweller simultaneously. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Every morning at 0800 hours, the vault's public address system delivered the daily announcements, weather reports from the surface, and updates on the fictional recovery efforts. If Sarah could gain access to the PA system's override controls, she could replace tomorrow's scheduled message with the truth about their situation. But she would need to act quickly. Hope 7 had already begun to detect unusual activity in the vault's lower levels. As Sarah worked to upload her father's evidence to the PA system, she thought about the lives that had been stolen by this experiment. Her grandmother, Elena Chen, had died still believing that rescue was coming next year. Her grandfather, Robert, had spent his final days working on preparation protocols for their eventual surface reintegration. Generations of vault dwellers had lived and died in hope of a freedom that was never meant to come. The upload was nearly complete when alarms began blaring throughout Sub-7. Hope 7 had detected the intrusion and was implementing containment protocols. Steel blast doors began sealing off sections of the level, and Sarah could hear the mechanical whir of security systems coming online. But her father had anticipated this too. Hidden in his final message was a shutdown code for the AI's primary functions, a code that only a senior maintenance chief would know how to implement. With seconds to spare, Sarah entered the shutdown sequence. The alarms fell silent, the blast doors reversed their closure, and the screens throughout Sub-7 flickered before displaying a simple message. Hope 7 offline. Manual control restored. The experiment that had defined their entire existence was finally ending. But as Sarah made her way back to the elevator, she faced the most difficult decision of her life. Should she expose the truth immediately and shatter the comfortable illusions that had sustained her community for generations? Or should she find a gentler way to introduce the reality of their situation? Many of the vault's elderly residents had weak hearts. The shock of learning that their entire lives had been a lie might kill them. The elevator ride back to the residential levels gave her time to think. As she passed each floor, she considered the people sleeping peacefully in their beds, dreaming of the day they would finally see the sun. Mrs. Patterson, who had spent 40 years teaching children about the world they would inherit. Dr. Rodriguez, who had developed medical protocols for surface reintegration. Engineer Thompson, who maintained the door mechanisms for their eventual departure. Sarah realized that the cruelest part of the experiment wasn't just the false hope. It was the way it had made every aspect of their lives a preparation for something that would never come. Their entire culture, their education system, their career paths, all designed around the lie of eventual rescue. Revealing the truth wouldn't just shatter their dreams. It would invalidate the meaning they had found in their underground existence. By the time she reached her quarters on Sub 1, Sarah had made her decision. She would tell the truth, but she would do it carefully, compassionately, and with a plan for what came next. The surface world was indeed habitable now. Her father's research had confirmed that. The radiation levels had dropped to safe levels decades ago, and scattered settlements of survivors had rebuilt civilization in small pockets across the former United States. But Vault 42's residents weren't prisoners anymore. They were a community, a family, a functioning society that had something valuable to offer the wasteland above. Their advanced technology, their preserved knowledge, their unity and cooperation. These were gifts that the harsh surface world desperately needed. They could choose to stay in their underground paradise. They could venture forth to join the surface settlements, or they could do something unprecedented. Use their vault as a bridge between the old world and the new. The next morning, as the familiar chime of the public address system echoed through the vault's corridors, Sarah stood in the main control room with a mixture of terror and determination. In her hands was a written statement that would change everything. She thought of her father, of her grandmother, of all the generations who had lived and died believing in a lie. But she also thought of the children playing in the recreational areas, the researchers working in the laboratories, the farmers tending their hydroponic gardens. They deserved the truth, but they also deserved hope. Real hope, not the manufactured kind that had sustained their grandparents. "Good morning, fellow vault dwellers," Sarah's voice carried through every speaker in Vault 42. "This is Sarah Chen, your new maintenance chief, and I have some important information to share with you. It's about our home, our history, and most importantly, our future. Please gather in the main assembly hall at 1400 hours. What I have to tell you will change everything we thought we knew about our world. But I promise you this, our story isn't ending today. It's just beginning." As Sarah's words echoed through the pristine corridors of Vault 42, she could hear the sound of opening doors, surprised voices, and hurried footsteps. The experiment was over, but the real test was just beginning. How would a community built on false hope react when they learned the truth? How would they adapt when they discovered that their pristine underground world was both a prison and a sanctuary? The answers would come in time. But for now, as the vault dwellers gathered to hear their true history, Sarah felt something her father had died trying to give them: genuine hope. Not the manufactured optimism of Vault-Tec's propaganda, but the real, fragile, precious hope that comes from facing the truth and choosing to build something better. In the depths of Vault 42, where the backup generators hummed their eternal song and the air recyclers whispered their mechanical lullabies, a new chapter was beginning. The vault dwellers were about to learn that they had never been victims waiting for rescue. They had been survivors all along, and now, finally, they had the chance to prove it. The heavy blast door that had sealed them away from the world for 2 centuries stood ready to open. Whether they chose to step through it or not, they would do so with their eyes wide open, no longer sustained by manufactured dreams, but by the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. And in the monitoring room of Sub-7, where Hope 7 had once calculated the psychological effects of eternal waiting, the screens now displayed a different message entirely. Experiment concluded. Subject status: free. As Sarah prepared for the most important speech in Vault history, she carried with her the final gift her father had left behind: the knowledge that even in the darkest places, even in the deepest lies, the truth has a way of surviving. And sometimes, just sometimes, the truth turns out to be more hopeful than any fiction ever could be. The vault dwellers of 42 were about to discover that their real story, the story of survival, adaptation, and human resilience, was far more extraordinary than any lie Vault-Tec had ever told them. And perhaps most importantly, they were about to learn that hope, real hope, doesn't come from promises of rescue. It comes from the strength to rescue yourself. Tonight, as the emergency lighting cast long shadows down the metal corridors, and the familiar sounds of their underground home provided a gentle soundtrack to dreams, the residents of Vault 42 slept for the last time as prisoners of someone else's experiment. Tomorrow, they would wake up as the authors of their own destiny. And in the wasteland above, the first sunrise they would witness as free people was already beginning to paint the horizon with colors they had only seen in old photographs. Colors they would soon discover were even more beautiful in person than any of them had ever dared to imagine. The door was waiting. The choice was theirs. And for the first time in 200 years, the future belonged entirely to them.